In this topic, we are going to focus on two learning outcomes. First of all, we study the terminologies of food chain, food web, and trophic level. After that, we have to study the concept of energy transfer by using the example of petty field ecosystem. Food chain is the linear pathway along which food energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level. So here are the examples of ecosystem found in the tropical rainforest, which is one food chain consists of 4 trophic levels. The first trophic levels are always belong to autotroph, or they are actually producers in a food chain, which are the organisms able to produce their own food, such as plants and algae. The arrow shown in a food chain is representing the feeding relationship, which is always one way. This means the bamboo is eaten by grubs, and the grubs is eaten by gorilla, and gorilla is eaten by leopard. But not another way around. This is impossible. Trophic level means the position or stage that an organism occupies in a food chain. In nature, one food chain consists of 4 or 5 trophic levels only. So here is the example of one food chain with 5 trophic levels. The first trophic level is always producer and is moving upwards up to the 5th trophic level, which is actually quaternary consumer. There are two types of food chains: grazing food chain and detritus food chain. Grazing food chain consists of predatory food chains, which means involve the predation relationship between the prey and predator. The second type of grazing food chain is parasitic food chain, which involve the parasite. Both food chains are showing the trophic levels always started from producers to primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and quaternary consumer. In this slide, let's say we use the example of 4 trophic levels. So for predatory food chain, the producers are always autotroph. That means the organism able to produce their own food, and it's eaten by primary consumer, which are herbivores, and herbivores are eaten by small carnivores, which is actually the secondary consumer. And lastly, the 4th trophic level is large carnivores, which are actually tertiary consumer. If we move on to the parasitic food chain, the first trophic level still autotroph, because they must be the producer in the first trophic level. And the primary consumer, or the second trophic level, are herbivores. The organism feed on plants or feed on producers. But in parasitic food chain, from the 3rd trophic level or secondary consumer, it consists of parasites, which are lice or bugs. And the 4th trophic level, which is the tertiary consumer, it consists of hyperparasite. That means the organisms are actually parasite to the previous trophic level. Now, the secondary consumer here are actually the host to the hyperparasite. Detritus food chain started with the detritus, or decomposing organic matter. That means the first trophic level is not more producers. And the second trophic level, which is still primary consumer, but now the primary consumer is not more herbivores. They are detritivores, such as earthworms or some insects. And the primary consumer will be eaten by secondary consumer, which is always small carnivore, and the small carnivore can be eaten by the tertiary consumer, which is occupying the fourth trophic level, and they are usually larger carnivores. Food web is a complex network of food chains. They are interconnected with one another in an ecosystem. It means they show the interconnection between more than one food chain. So let's continue with the previous example. If we study one food chain in the tropical rainforest, okay, we can notice that the producers can be the food source for more than one type of organisms, such as here it can be the food source for grubs. At the same time, it can be the food source for other animals. So for instance, now we have two food chains. But in nature, food web can be more complicated. So if we look at more details, the same food source or the same producer, it can become the food for other animals. Okay, now we have another food chain showing here. So how many food chains found in this food web? So we can check the interconnection between the food web carefully. So we can notice here are one food chain, second, and we have the third one and the fourth one. Always remember, one food chain always began with the producers. As a summary, a food chain means that one organism occupies one trophic level. So if we study the ecology, okay, each trophic level usually refer to one organism. And these organisms are always the food source for the next trophic level. So like this example, bamboo is the food source for the grubs, and the grub is the food source for the next level. So each organism has one food source. Because of this concept, that's why most of the ecologists, they say that this is less effective in nature. Dalam semula jadi, food chain adalah tidak praktikal atau bukan menunjukkan kenyataan yang sebenar. Because ecology is a complicated study, or we say ecosystem involve a lot of organisms in that area. So food web is more realistic. Food web has the main idea is one organism may play more than one role. Dia mempunyai peranan lebih daripada satu, atau kita kata occupied more than one trophic levels. So for example, our first trophic levels are always producers, which is always the food source for the primary consumer, and the primary consumer will become the food source for the secondary consumer, and secondary consumer will be eaten by the tertiary consumer. So in this example is the leopard, okay, or is occupied at the fourth trophic level. But if we study more detail, we have another role for the leopard. Let's say we look at this another food chain. The first trophic level still the producers, which is always eaten by the primary consumers or herbivores, and the primary consumers will become the food source for the next trophic level. Here is the secondary consumer, or now the leopard is occupying the third trophic level. This is why we say the organisms may occupy more than one trophic levels. And another concept why we say food web is more realistic is because the organism may have more than one food source. So for example, both snake and leopard, they have more than one type of food source, which from different trophic levels. Both food chain and food web are not talking about the feeding relationship, but they are also discussing about the energy flow in one ecosystem. So where does the energy come from for one ecosystem is actually related with the solar energy or the sunlight energy. 40% of the solar energy are reflected by the ozone layer or reflected by the Earth's surfaces, such as the hydrosphere, and 15% are absorbed and converted as heat energy in the atmosphere, and 45% able to reach at the Earth's surface. And what happened to this 45%? Let's look at the happening to this percentage. The 45% of solar energy that reach at the Earth's surface, only 1 to 5% able to use by the producers. The energy are absorbed by the plants or algae or autotroph to undergo the photosynthesis and produce the organic molecules in the body of the organisms. So this is for biomass production. And through the feeding relationship, when the primary consumer feed on the producers, there are only 10% of energy from the producer transfer into the next trophic level, which is going to be assimilated by the primary consumer. And the same happening occur to the next trophic level when the secondary consumer feed on the primary consumer. 10% of energy will be transferred to this trophic level, and this organism will assimilate the energy. And the next trophic level, which is the tertiary consumer, when they feed on the secondary consumer, 10% energy will be transferred. Majority of the energy, or 90% of the energy, will be lost as heat to the environment through a few processes. So from the first trophic level, such as producer, to the following trophic level, such as primary consumer, then secondary consumer, and lastly tertiary consumer, the energy can be lost through process respiration, and all the trophic levels able to perform excretion. And if the organisms die, they will form the decaying materials, which will be decomposed by fungus or bacteria. And decomposition is a process able to produce heat as well. And some organic non-living materials, such as the waste or the feces, they produce through the process egestion. If they involve the animals in the primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. So egestion process can contribute to the decomposition as well. Why we say 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next trophic level is actually related with assimilation, which means how the organism distribute and use the digested food molecules, which are nutrients in their body cells. So if we look at this summarized diagram, when the producers is eaten by the herbivores or the primary consumer, the energy will be taken by the organisms. However, not all energy able to transfer to the primary consumer. 90% will be lost through the process of cellular respiration, even though this is a process to produce energy. But before that, some energy will be used to drive it. That's why we say energy can be lost through cellular respiration as heat. And some energy are lost through the process egestion, that means the formation of the feces. And assimilation are actually referred to the 10% of energy able to transfer from producer to the primary consumer, and they will use this energy to form new cells. That's why we say the biomass production. So assimilated energy have three purposes: for growth, the new cell formation, or it can be stored as a glycogen in their muscle cell or the liver cells, or they will be used to involve in the reproduction, the formation of the zygote in the female body. And in nature, one food chain is always found in 4 or 5 trophic levels, or it's very rare to more than 5 trophic levels. So if we look at the role in the food chain or look the role in the ecosystem, from the first trophic level, which are producers, move on to the primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and the quaternary consumer, the energy is getting reducing from the first to the highest level. Okay, that means upper level receive less energy than the previous one. The reason is because only 10% of energy is transferred to the next level, and this made the energy found in the higher level is very rare, is very low in quantity, and is unable to support another level anymore in the ecosystem. There are two formulas related with the energy flow, which are how to calculate the percentage of energy loss in one food chain. So here is the formula. We have to identify the initial energy, that means the beginning energy, minus the final energy, and divided by the initial energy, and never forget the symbol 100. And another formula is percentage of energy transfer. What is the percentage of energy passed to the next trophic level? So it will be formulated with the final energy divided by the initial energy and times with the 100 to become percentage. Okay, let's move on to the last learning outcome about the energy flow in petty field ecosystem. So I propose one food chain that began with the producers, which is the grass as the outer draw, and move on to the second trophic level, the primary consumer, the third trophic level, secondary consumer, and the fourth trophic level, which is the tertiary consumer. And if you study this question carefully, you are given the specific amount of energy found in each level and include the source of energy. So the amounts are represented by specific units as well, which is the kilojoule per meter square of surface area every year. So usually the unit is standardized to ease the calculation. Okay. Here I propose two question tasks. You may try to do it as a self-revision.